Well, hey guys. Welcome. My name is Stephanie Caballero. Thank you so much for joining me. I love doing this. I love talking to you. If you're not going to stay on for all of it, that's fine. If you need me to do something, change a format, have a guest, you have some questions, you want me to talk about something specific, can I talk today? OMG. Um, Let me know, right? I definitely want to hear from you. So you can find me on all the socials. You can email me. I need water today. Have you ever felt one of those days, right? When you need water. Oh, let me turn off my phone. People text me during this and it's just slightly distracting. Okay, turned off my phone and watch. Oh, I think I did. Wait, let's do the phone now. Oh God, no, that's ring. Gosh. Okay, silent. Okay, so birthright citizenship. That is the big case for us in surrogacy because all our international intended parents can get a passport within 24 to 48 hours. So it is a wonderful thing. We love that for them. They don't necessarily want US citizens for their children. They are going to their home country typically. Some do appreciate that. It's a great passport to have. I'm not going to lie. Why would you not want it if you had to go to another country, right, and have your baby? But it is something that lets them, as we all know, leave the country very soon. Anyways, the case was heard last week on April Fool's Day. You gotta love that, right? I tell you. And both sides of the aisle, so the Democrat and the Republican justices, of course, they'll tell you we don't have Republican or Democratic justices, but they gotta do. Anyways, they both expressed doubt. It's bad when the Trump administration attorney argues and says to the justices, the world has changed. And the Chief Justice looks at you and says, yeah, but it's the same Constitution. So, yeah, they're in trouble. What do you say? He also said other comments. So, if you want to read the comments, they're really, really, really entertaining. Both conservatives are on both sides of the aisle, talked to the Trump administration about, well, they want an allegiance test for all the citizens. And they said, well, how would that work? Right? How's a baby going to say, I pledge allegiance? The baby can't even talk, right? And then they said, especially for, Native Americans, they're foundlings, or foundling babies with unknown parents, how would that work, right? That was Amy Coney Barrett. She's a conservative, right? Of course, then the Trump administration talked about birth tourism because they feel very strongly that it's happening. Uh, of course, it's happening. It's just, I don't think it's happening on the scale that they say it's happening. But then the justices on both sides of the aisle told them that, well, we have policy goals here. It's 150 years of legal understanding, constitutional text, precedent. They finally said legal precedent. So it looks like the Trump executive order banning birthright citizenship is not going to go through. However, final decision will be end of June, early July. I have a feeling it's going to be early July. They usually save the biggest and the best for last. So we'll keep you posted, right? So now we're moving on to the states. So Texas, which I love Texas, I'm going to say something kind of not so good. But anyways, the court system is typically great. They don't require a lot of documentation. They have a great understanding of surrogacy. I love all my surrogates. My Texas surrogates are some of the gals that are just no nonsense, got it, do it. Okay, 500 shots, where do you want me to be? Show up, but the courts are giving us a little bit of a pushback since the Mark surrogacy case. They were involved in that. If you recall, that was the case. I'm sure all the agency owners and people on this know that. It's the case where the agency owners were intended parents as well. Gosh, and they hid their identity from the surrogates. And the surrogates, it was fraud, really, in my book, because the surrogates thought they were, these intended parents. They didn't know they were the agency owners. But Texas had a case, and so they're giving us a lot of pushback. They're having a lot of the attorneys in the state go through hearings. I know I haven't had a hearing yet, but I'm sure I'm going to because I have some cases in Texas. So they're by Zoom, so don't worry. But there has been a lot of pushback and a lot of hearings for a lot of other attorneys. We've got a whole listserv kind of email group going. So hopefully we'll get some clarity on what the judges want to see. And hopefully very soon, there'll be some resolution. But just keep in mind as an agency owner that, if you have a Texas case, typically there's going to be more required for the attendant parents as well as the attorney involved. I had a recent case. I definitely know that Texas really does not like when intended parents cannot come and pick up their baby. Sometimes it can't be helped, especially if they cannot get a visa here to come pick up their baby. And I was recently involved in a case where I had to pick up the baby. And it was a whole week talking to the hospital attorneys, the outside attorneys, other attorneys. They wanted to see court orders. They wanted to see so many things. We already had a court order. We actually got the final court order for surrogacy. But now I actually know what to do before the birth certificate is issued and what to do after the birth certificate is issued to get the baby out of the hospital. But the baby was there for over a week. So it was very trying for the parents, very fraught, very little sleep. But the baby is out. The baby is in good hands. So that was a win for everybody there. So just keep an eye on Texas. I don't want to say that it's a state that you don't want to work at. You just need to know that a little bit more might be required. So we're going to keep an eye on it and hopefully it'll go back to being amazing and wonderful, right? Okay, still staying in the States and giving you some update, especially if you're an agency, Alabama. So if you have cases in Alabama, you need to talk to your attorney. If your attorney has not reached out to you, I am not licensed in Alabama, but one of my clients, I love and adore these people. I love and adore everybody, but they had such a long journey, like years. And it was donor surrogate, but sometimes, as we all know in this industry, sometimes that happens. Anyways, there was just this one judge because they don't have a statute in Alabama, which we all practiced 15, 20 years ago without a statute. We used a contract, the intent to parent controlled, it's uncontested, the surrogate doesn't want to be a parent, and it worked. Well, this one judge they had in Alabama would sign the orders, and now the judge is refusing. And the judge says, which I need to find out why, the judge says that because they're involved in subsequent court proceedings, after the judge has entered the hearing, which I don't understand what proceedings a judge would be involved in because if I use a California order and the California order gets accepted in, let's say, Alabama, I'm just going to work with vital records. I'm just going to work with the hospital. I'm not going to work with the court. Or if my order has to be domesticated in one state, like I've got a California order, we can't use, like for Indiana. We can't use an Indiana order. So California is great. It has to be domesticated, meaning I have an attorney that I work with. He goes into the Indiana court, gets a little Indiana stamp, gets the Indiana case number, and we're great. But again, it's not really, the judge is seeing that for the first time and he's seeing a California order. So I really don't understand it, but you can't work in Alabama anymore. I don't know if Alabama has a lot of surrogacy going on, but just to let you know that Alabama is not a good state. So just keep that in mind. Reach out to your attorney if you want. You can reach out to me, but it's not a good state. I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but remember a year ago, 2 years ago, when these parents sued because, oh my gosh, it was a university IVF center, and the IVF center didn't lock their lab where they kept the eggs and the sperm and the embryos. So some patient, mental patient, just opened the lab door, walked in, and played with all the frozen vials and destroyed them. Yes, I'm not kidding. If you haven't read this case, like 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 you and I would lock the door, right? Like lock the door. Anyways, so they sued, and there were some very big unintended consequences. They just wanted damages, right? But the judge actually said, oh, frozen embryos? Well, they're people, right? They have rights. And if it's your person, you have a lot of rights. So IVF clinics were like, we can't take on this liability, and IVF was shut down, right? Completely shut down. So talk about unintended consequences. Well, those same parents are fighting so that that judge does not become the next state's attorney general. So wonder if the two are connected, and the Alabama judge who signed surrogacy is friends with that judge. Who knows? But anyways, that's what's going on in Alabama. So yeah. So good news for some states, not so good for other. But Texas, I think we're going to work through Texas. Texas has a long-standing tradition of being great for surrogacy. So I know the abortion laws are not great, but we work through that too. So anyways, Florida. Remember how we talked about Florida and the IVF? There's an update on that for the IVF clinic. But remember how Florida, they were going to amend their surrogacy statute and make it more in line with adoption, which surrogacy is not adoption. There is no child in being. It's mostly gestational. It's not her baby. She knows it's not her baby. The intended parents, they have always been and always wanted to be the parents, right? Totally different for us, right? Anyways, so Florida, they also had the anti-Chinese, they don't call it anti-Chinese, but Chinese, Iranian, there's certain groups that can't utilize surrogacy in Florida, which, oh my gosh, I'm on this Facebook group for surrogates. I learned so much from them, tell you. Fourth trimester, all the things about being pregnant because I had to have a surrogacy, and so I never really got far in my pregnancy. Anyways, I learned so much from them, and there was this one surrogate who had been working for a year with her Chinese IPs, and the whole thing had to get canceled. I felt so bad for her. Anyways, so that the statute didn't get revised or amended, and then the anti-Chinese thing regulation passed, right? Started in July. Anyways, the Florida Attorney General, though, is challenging the constitutionality of surrogacy, and that is continuing. So, attorneys there are definitely tracking that. And of course, the stakes are high for all the intended parents. I have cases there. Don't worry, agency owners, if you have cases, talk to your attorney. Obviously it takes a while to go through court and then it will probably be appealed, right? So it's not going to be this year or next year. At least I don't think so, right? Court cases take a long time. Anyways, so, and we've got the cases, but we're getting under contract. So my advice is to get under contract sooner rather than later, because with the anti-Chinese, I'm sorry, I'm just going to call it that because I think that's what it was. The anti-Chinese bill, they said you had to be under contract by a certain date, like July. So I think they'll definitely be agreeable and say by this date, right? So get under contract and get those underway. But that is going on, and she's encouraged, it's a female attorney, encouraged everybody in the industry to file a motion. So I'm going to reach out to her to file a motion, right? Because we want to highlight the benefits of surrogacy. It's the family building and the safeguards that we put in place, for the surrogate, the intended parents, the children's best interest. So, right. So I'll keep an eye on that and I'll keep you posted as always. Oh, the Florida clinic, it closed. The one with the IVF mix-up. Yeah, it closed. Well, not really closed. It's under new ownership as of May 1, 2026. So that was fast, right? It's now going to be CNY Fertility, right? So didn't really shut down, just changed owners. So, and I have a feeling why, because not only do they have the embryo mix-up, but they have another case, and the doctors alleged to not have screened the surrogate. I think, I'm not involved in the case, but I think because they were family and friends, I think family, right? That they did not do a psych screening. You could never ever waive a psych screening, and the parents of the surrogate are saying she has some mental illness. So, anyways, it's not a good situation. This pregnancy wasn't successful. So I know all the agencies do a psych screening. I know when I have my independent cases and they're independent and they're friends or family, I insist on a psych screening. So definitely psych screening for sure. Psych, medical screening, do all the things. It's so important, right? All right, South Dakota has made fertility fraud a felony. Thank God. Shockingly, a lot of states don't have a fertility fraud statute. California does because years and years ago there was a doctor clinic in Irvine that were taking embryos and putting them into other people without their knowledge. I know, right? Oh, here's an embryo from somebody. It's really good. She's not using it. These parents aren't using it. Let's just put it like it's sort of like not locking the lab door. Like, who thinks that's okay, right? But, they probably made money. So we'll leave it at that. Anyways, South Dakota signed a fertility fraud bill. So basically, it prevents doctors from doing those things. And they really based it on the Dr. Donald Klein. There's a really good documentary. It was on Netflix. I don't know if it's still there. He's fathered over 90 children. I think it's over 100 now. So they really did base it on that. They really want to stop doctors from saying, wow, well, I couldn't get the sperm they wanted, so I'll use mine. Let's talk about consent because nobody consented to that. And actually, this bill does allow the children to sue because their parent didn't consent, right? So, and they believe that the child's biological identity is a fundamental right. So hats off to South Dakota for that. Staying in the whole sperm area. Oh my gosh. I was recently out of town and I met a Canadian and he goes, hey, did you hear about that sperm case with the father and son out of Quebec? Or Quebec, if you want to say Quebec, but it's Quebec, I think. And I said, yes, I did. I shouldn't smile. They have they fathered 109. I don't know who has 109 genetic offspring and 240. So that's a lot of genetic offspring. So they are banned, this father and son, from donating sperm in Quebec. It's a province in Canada, like a state. I think they should be banned worldwide. So hopefully that will happen. That is insane. Unlike women who do egg donation, sperm is much easier to get. And of course, the justice ruled that the sheer volume of children exceeds expert recommendations by hundreds, right? There could be accidental, children born with siblings. So they've got an injunction which has stopped them. Hopefully, they'll get stopped all of Canada and then hopefully all over. So I'm sure they did this privately. Definitely do your research when you are going to a cryobank and getting sperm. How many times has this sperm been utilized? There's websites where you can put sperm donor numbers in to help you track that as well. So. But talking about sperm in a kind of fun way, oh my gosh, I love this story. A 36-year-old single nurse, she decided to have a sperm shower and bring her friends and family over to help her pick her sperm donor. A lot of single women, and some single men too, are continuing on to fatherhood and motherhood. They haven't found the one, or they want to do it single. Everybody has their own way of becoming a family. And when you go through that process of IVF, I know when I went through it, it is very lonely. You think that you're the only one, or maybe one other person, which I did. Oh my gosh. First IVF, she got a baby. Second IVF, she got a baby. Me, it took a million. I'm not mad at her. Well, I was a little not happy with her, but I was happy for her. Sad for me, slightly pissed off. Anyways, I digress. So she's threw a shower. I wanted to go, seriously. I mean, talk about the party favors, right? How fun would that be? She invited 20 friends and family, and they helped her pick it out. She had food and games, of course. She had a little draft style selection. They got down to 12. And then she actually had their voice to help pick. And she actually said that she did select the donor and she did on emotional intelligence and kindness. So I love that. I love that. It is a great fun story. Sometimes in our industry, things, the negative press comes out. So that's really something to do. So if you are single or if you know somebody, right, like have a little party, right? For sure. Educate people who since they can sometimes say unintended things that are not so nice. So, right? So, Black women in IVF, it's no surprise that there's racism. I follow this surrogate who I love her. She is so funny. I don't represent her. Oh my gosh, I just follow her on Facebook. She's very vocal about the experiences she has, being a Black surrogate. Even in the selection process, there's racism also for, medical care. She knows she talks about how she has to advocate for herself as a Black woman surrogate, a Black pregnant woman. And so Black women do have worse IVF outcomes. She did not, though. She went full term and delivered a healthy baby, and she's going to go again as soon as it's medically safe, though. She is waiting the full year. Right? But she did talk about that and she discusses that. Well, anyways, Black women do have worse IVF outcomes. And so the research is going to continue because Black women actually stimulate slightly better as a population than Caucasian women. So, right? Who knew? So, why do they have worse IVF outcomes? I do know that as a population, Black women tend to have more fibroids in their uterus. It's like cysts in their uterus. So that could be an issue, but also, medical care is not as good for Black women, so that probably can be an issue as well. So they're going to continue to study it, but I just really love this gal on Instagram. And I think as an agency owner, if you've got a Black surrogate, you definitely can learn something from them and advocating for them and helping them through the process, because I think that is exactly what everybody needs, you know at the end of the day, right? So, and I don't know if you can follow this gal, but I learn a lot from her for sure. And I love learning. All right, so we've talked about a little bit about IVF mix-ups, and we're going to Cyprus. I know a lot of people go overseas. I know Cyprus is definitely a big place to do surrogacy. Is surrogacy done there? Maybe not, but IVF for sure. No, I think surrogacy is done there. I'll have to check on that, actually. Don't call me. Anyways, so again, wrong sperm use. I don't know if it was the doctor who used his sperm. I don't know if it's been discovered, but I'm sure it is, right? Anyways, so these British families have discovered through DNA testing that the wrong sperm was used. I think there are 7 families affected, and it is a popular region. So I'm not saying don't go there, right? Because there's good clinics. For sure, there are good clinics everywhere. So really and truly, you don't want to. Are people texting me? No. You really don't want to avoid a place just because there's one bad decision or there's one bad thing happening, because as a whole, could there be great clinics? Of course, but do your research, right? Find out that clinic. Google them, not just chat GPT them, Google them, right? Right. So you'll find out, more. And then, see if you can talk about the lab. What do they do in their lab? How do they prevent errors? How do they tag? How do they, uh, do they lock the lab door? That might be a good question to ask, right? I have to tell you, going through IVF, yes, your physician is super important, but the lab is critical, obviously. That's where your embryos are going to be created. That's where they're going to be stored. So you want to check out both, just as an FYI. All right. So moving on to pregnancy, because we deal with people who are pregnant, whether you're the surrogate or the intended mother, we definitely, as people in the industry, we want to help people have a great pregnancy. And a lot of women are getting pregnant later in life. Even surrogates sometimes are a bit older. So there is a trend because now women are having their careers, or, a surrogate is like, there's surrogates that are older, they're over 35. And please, doctors, if they could stop saying that you're a geriatric pregnancy. I mean, can you imagine? God, what an awful term, but that is what they say. I hope they don't say that anymore. But definitely, it's no shock how to help women later in life have a more successful pregnancy. We want to avoid high blood pressure and all the things, and it is to have a healthy diet. Definitely move, work out, walk, things like that. So it really is no shock as to what to do, but definitely it's you optimize your health before you get pregnant. So not while you're pregnant. Of course, it's you want a healthy diet while you're pregnant, but a craving is a craving. And when you're pregnant, you cannot ignore cravings, right? But definitely definitely optimize your health before you get pregnant. So there is something to be said. I'm not going to lie for that first trimester. Wait, do they call it the first trimester? No. What do they call before the first trimester? They're trying to coin some term for it. But anyways, there is something to be said for that before the first trimester, right? So staying active, getting healthy, managing any chronic conditions if you have any. So, it's definitely something to watch out for as an agency. In fact, I'll get to something else that I've been talking about for years. But oh my gosh, I love talking about little things that somewhat don't affect us, but they do. Birth control is something in the industry that women take. I took it when I was trying to get pregnant, before my egg retrievals. Most surrogates take it to suppress them, and then the doctor gives you medication to prepare your uterus. So Catholic colleges, of course, they ban birth control, and these students got together and they created this womb service. Because let's face it, Catholic kids are having sex. So let's not have any unintended consequences. So they hand out the morning after pill as well as condoms. So good for them. It's kind of like a little underground network. And so I hope it just continues. In fact, it would be great to have this at every college, right? I have young children, and I know they don't want to have children right now. So, but hats off to them. I love when kids are creative like that, right? And then speaking of something for pregnancy, doula care is going mainstream, and I love that. I know overseas, midwives are something that is typical. In the US, they have started to become typical, and I've always been an advocate for a doula and a midwife because at the hospital, the doctor is not there. The doctor is there to deliver the baby. You either have like your person, your best friend, your spouse, your mother. But to have somebody who has been with you through your pregnancy and help coaching you through your pregnancy as a surrogate, as an intended mother going through IVF or IVF and egg donation, oh my gosh, you know, I mean, especially if you've never gone through pregnancy, surrogates have, but every pregnancy and childbirth is different, right? So to have somebody there is amazing. And in our country, in the United States, everything's governed by insurance. So now 30 states now reimburse doulas through Medicaid. So that's great. And private insurers, like United Healthcare. I don't know if they're good for surrogacy though. So if they're not, sorry. But doula care, yes. So I think agencies, it's something that you should consider for the surrogates. Not every surrogate wants it, but for the surrogates that do, and if you're a surrogate, I would definitely advocate for that. I would just want somebody there for me. And if you have a doula, 40% lower risk of C-sections, right? And 29% reduction in preterm births. And as an intended parent, as a surrogate, we all want a healthy outcome. If you're doing IVF for yourself, you want a healthy outcome. So I would say get a doula. I'm not going to say, and they're there afterwards too, because there's the fourth trimester, there's the hormones, there's all the things that are going on with your body because you're no longer pregnant. But creating and growing a human is hard work. So your body takes a while to go back. I don't know this personally, but I know this from following all the surrogates. So just as an FYI, if you are an agency or a surrogate, you might want to advocate and get a doula, right? And surrogacy is going more mainstream. There was an article in Axios about it. Well, it's always been mainstream for me. I had my children via surrogacy, and I've been in this industry for 20 years. But I'm so glad that was such a good article about, how it is done in the United States. There are safeguards. There are safeguards here. I know in other countries there are safeguards there. Yes, there are bad actors, and we're going to try to get rid of those bad actors and prevent those bad actors. But for most of the people in this industry, we want the very best outcome for everybody. So I thought, well, how's it going mainstream? Is it even bigger than what I mean, right? But in 2004, this article says there was only 15,039 surrogate births, which I think that's kind of low, but maybe it's accurate. And then there was a peak of 11,515 in 2023. That is actually a huge trend. So that's great for people in the industry, great for surrogates, for people that need a surrogate or work with a surrogate to have a child. For me, it was a wonderful, wonderful time in my life. And the women that do that is amazing. And everybody's working for the best outcome so we can have one little tiny or two little tiny babies as long as they're healthy. One is better at a time, right? But it really shows the broader shift. Um, and how reproductive health is changing. Obviously, a lot has to do with people having children later in life. You know, women, when they get out of college, they want a career. They may not be having children right away. Now they can freeze their eggs. Thank God for that, right? So, because, women cliff sooner than men. But that's a good thing that it's going more mainstream. I did see an article, and I remember during the recession that women were doing egg donation more and servicing more because it was just a brutal time for everybody involved. And now, things are a little bit rockier now. We have a ceasefire with the war, so in Iran, so hopefully that maintains. We want calmness in the world. We want people to have good job markets and everything. But there's a woman in Atlanta, and she was interviewed because they moved from California to Atlanta for a job. The job fell through, and she's thinking about doing egg donation and surrogacy to help make ends meet. And that just reminded me of during the housing bust and the recession in 2009, 10, that women were doing that. Obviously, you have to pass medical screening and psychological screening. You cannot just raise your hand and say that you're going to be a surrogate or an egg donor. So there's that. We want it to be safe for everybody, safe for you, safe for the intended parents, and of course for the child involved. But hopefully, this is just a little blip. But I'll be watching that and seeing if that's a trend for sure. Okay, we have another embryo dispute. So please, 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 when you are going to IVF, when you are speaking to your intended parents as an agency, they're going to ask you what you want done, or they should ask you what you want done with your embryos if you divorce or break up, if you're not married. I had no idea that was going to be asked of me. I was just going in to have a baby. I looked at this document. I'm like, I don't know how to answer this because you don't have, well, I didn't have a lot of time, but I'm sure they give you more time. In California, your embryo disposition document should be a separate document. It's a contract. It has been upheld in court, right? So should be very clear, small little paragraphs, you initial, right? But in this case, it was in Colorado and it's a TikToker and they've broken up. She does not want those embryos utilized. She doesn't want a biological child that somebody else is taking care of. They've broken up. She doesn't want to be a parent. She doesn't want those embryos with her ex-husband. He is fighting for them. And typically, when there is an embryo dispute, the documents were not clear. So, for the love of God, how many years are we going to be going over this? Let's get some clear documents. Attorneys in Colorado, let's talk to the IVF centers. Let's get some really good documentation so we don't have these disputes. I mean, we're not going to prevent them, but let's get some clear documentation, right? He's fighting. He wants to bring them to life. Interestingly enough, he is running for mayor of Windsor, Colorado. So, hmm. Don't know how this is going to affect his campaign and reputation, but we shall see, right? And then in Delaware, Delaware does have surrogacy bill. So for all you people working in Delaware, they do have a surrogacy statute. But the attorneys and the stakeholders in Delaware would like to update it. It's not gender neutral. We'd like to make it gender neutral so it's both equally for men and women, same sex, if you're opposite sex, right? We want to include everything. And there's something called the UPA, the Uniform Parentage Act, and they would like to bring the Delaware surrogacy statute in line with that. But timing is everything, and they are getting some pushback, of course. So the sponsor of the bill, woman is definitely getting pushback from some conservative groups. So I don't know how it's going to go. The conservative groups want to do more of what was proposed in Florida, an adoption style safeguard, but this is not adoption. The woman giving birth, it's not her own child. She's not giving up her child. There was a contract before. There are parents. There's a surrogate. She wants to go, oh, and then hand over the baby and go, parents, you take over. I'm going to take a nap. That's what she wants to do. So, like I said, timing is everything, and I'm not sure. this is the best time to do this, but I'll follow it, right? And speaking of pregnancy, I know everybody is anti-vax, and I keep saying this over and over and over again, but there was a study out of Oslo, and the COVID shot during pregnancy does help. I know, sorry. You can still decide not to get it, right? Up to you, up to the parents, up to the surrogate. It's totally fine. But it does say that it really helps passive immunity and it helps the unborn child. So I'm just passing along. I am just the messenger. I did not do the study, but I just would like to pass that along for you, just as an FYI. Okay. And infertility in public health, we're trying to push that it's a public health issue, and it is. If it's a public health issue, then in the United States you get insurance, and it becomes more affordable for everybody. IVF is very, very expensive in the United States, and we want to make it affordable for you. 15% of US couples go through infertility, 1 in 6 people globally. So it is a public health. And because of that, actually, we did get some insurance relief in California. Yay. I know when I was going through IVF, I wanted to move to New Jersey or Illinois because there was no insurance for me here, and there was there, but I did not move. I, did what most people do and took money from, here and there and everywhere it seemed. So I would love to make it a public health concern, but then we have federal government involved, so maybe not. There's pros and cons for both, right? But they definitely say if it was a public health concern, there would be less barriers for people because it's expensive and a lot of people can't afford it. So, there's pros and cons for everything, right? Right? Okay. I like to end with something that's fun and light. And we're going to talk about sex and space. I don't know if you're following the Artemis 2 voyage. Oh my gosh, I find it fascinating. I am not a science person in any way, stretch of the imagination. Did I know what I was saying? Anyways, stretch and form, whatever you say, right? I mean, I'm a reader, I don't do math. I still count on my fingers. No lie. Um, but I've been following it because I love the pictures of the moon. I think it's fascinating. I think the astronauts, when they go, I follow them on Instagram. Oh my gosh, the things they say are pretty funny with the hair out there with the gal. So I think it's great. But so here's the thing about sperm, because they're talking about sperm and sex in space. I know sex in space, right? Well, Elon wants to go to Mars. So there's that. And we are going to the moon to see if we can live on the moon, I think, eventually. Not in my lifetime, of course, but getting back to the sperm, the little swimmers. Well, they actually have their motility. So they actually move the same in space, but they don't know where to go. They get lost. The navigational skills of sperm in space are just not good. So scientists who are studying this, could you imagine like getting a grant to study sperm and sex in space? Um, God, what would that be like? The whole study, sex in space. Anyways, I digress. So they don't really know where to go, the sperm. So there's been a 30% reduction in fertilization rates. Not too bad, but not great. So they're going to further study this to see how they can help with sex in space, because future lunar or Martian settlements, we're going to need to know how to work this out. Really and truly, we could just do artificial insemination, but that is such a thing. Maybe a turkey baster? I don't know. But they still don't know how to swim. They still don't know where to go. And they still know where to go with a turkey baster. Anyways, not a scientist. It's not my area, but sex in space doesn't really work. And I'm just going to leave it with that. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining. If you have any questions, if you want to see something that I haven't done, if you want a format, if you want me to have a guest, just let me know, right? Reach out to me. But thank you, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.